Hey guys, Technomentary video for you guys. In today's video, we're going to talk about the iPhone 6s going into 2023, if this phone is worth it, and everything you need to know about the iPhone 6s if you have it or using it or even think about getting it. So let's dive right into it. So the iPhone 6s here, as you see in my hand, very small, lightweight phone if you compare it to some of the newer smartphone on the market here, but it was released back in September of 2014, and it's kind of hard to believe it, but this phone is now just a little over 8 years, and later this year in September it's going to be hitting that 9-year mark. So if you think about this phone in terms of just smartphone, it's a really old phone. But again, nonetheless, as you can see here, we have a lot of these apps downloaded and installed on the phone, but we'll get to that in a bit. As you can see here, it does have Touch ID here. You got this front camera as well. If you take a look in the back here, you got this aluminum body built to it, that classic design which we've seen. It was a bigger phone from the iPhone 5 lineup here when the 6 was released. It brought in some changes. Of course, you got these speakers on the bottom, you got that headphone jack, which a lot of people like, and of course that camera here, that's only an 8 megapixel camera, so not as some of the newer phones which have almost 3 cameras and up to 48 megapixel camera. That 8 megapixel camera doesn't seem like anything now. You also notice here a physical SIM card, which is an important thing because the iPhone 14 lineup no longer has a physical SIM card, and some people prefer this physical SIM card over using the eSIM card because it is kind of one of those things. If you have an unlocked phone, you can take your SIM card out and put another SIM card, especially if you're traveling around. It makes a difference for you. So those are a couple things about the iPhone 6 here. So the iPhone 6 here does come equipped with Apple's A8 chipset on it with 1 gig of RAM. Now, if you think about 1 gig of RAM, doesn't seem a lot comparing to now. If you think about the iPhone 14 lineup, which has about 6 gigs of RAM, 1/6 the power and performance that you get out of this phone. Now, moving on to the other thing, like the battery here. For example, this one we had to replace and put a new battery. That's why the battery capacity is 100%. But the battery capacity here that you have is a 1810 mAh battery, which gives you around 11 hours of video playback, and if you're lucky you get those 11 hours, but generally within 7-8 hours this phone sort of needs to be charged again, depending on, of course, your usage here. Now, if you compare it to the iPhone 14 lineup, just a regular 14 model itself gives you around 20 hours of video playback. This doesn't seem like a lot. Now, moving on to the next thing, as we mentioned here briefly, the camera, it's very limited. It does have 8 megapixel camera, so you do still get those okay photos. You're not going to get the greatest photos. You can actually record some good videos as well, but when it comes to just other things, the phone is very limited in the camera. Things like if you're looking for cinematic mode, action mode, night mode, macro mode, all of those upgraded features, and even recording 4K, the iPhone 6s unfortunately does not have those ability for you. So there's are pretty much a limit. As you can see here, you'll get those shaking in the camera as well because of course it's a limited camera. Basically, for the bare minimum of a camera requirement, the iPhone 6s will get that job done for you. And now moving on to probably the biggest thing why this iPhone is or would be worth it if it's the update that you get in it. So if I open up and take a look at the updates that you get it here, the iPhone 6 here was kind of cut short because it stopped getting updates after iOS 12. Now, if you think about it, we're up to iOS 16 now, going into 2023. Later this year, we're going to probably see iOS 17 comes out. But the thing about the iPhone that we pretty much are really surprised from Apple, at least, is that if you look at it, you continue to get these security bug fixes that are still being pushed out by Apple. As you can see here, 12.5.7, and that's kind of thing when it comes to Apple devices, that these might still get update until iOS 17 comes out. We don't really know, but we're still seeing these updates just continually happen. So if you're using iPhone 6s, don't be surprised that you got those updates, but you can't go past iOS 12, of course. And that kind of brings us to the next point here, is some apps no longer are compatible on this device here. We start to test out some of the popular apps. As you can see here, they still work, but they're running an older version of their app. So if there's a new version out, it doesn't update to it, and sometimes that might be bad for you because new version might have certain features that you want to use, but unfortunately, because you can't update it to that latest version of that app, you won't be able to take advantage of those features. As you can see here, a lot of the apps, when I open it up, they'll open. Some of them will work. Some of them will look to try to update to the last version that's available. And sooner or later, we're going to see some apps completely not work, which even when you open up things like Netflix, as you can see, sometimes you get these error messages. Again, you can get through them. Sometimes it allows you. Sometimes some apps, as I mentioned, will not work simply just because it is running 4 generation behind in terms of software update. But when it comes to performance, as you can see here, when I try to open up applications, sometimes you have to wait somewhere between 10 to 15 seconds before the application opens up, just because, of course, the newer apps require much more power, which the iPhone 6 just can't deliver. So those are going to be a couple things to mention. So when I bring it back, is the iPhone 6 worth it going into 2023? Or simple answer, it's going to be, it's really not worth it any longer, just because it doesn't update. It gets the major update that we want. Apps are starting to not work. But if you're really looking for a phone, or if you're stealing the iPhone 6 and don't want to upgrade or pay to upgrade, if you can do basic things like calling and texting and you're fine with that, again, the iPhone 6s is not a bad option when you compare it to some of the counter smart devices out there, because it's supported on Apple's platform, which allows you to take advantage of some of Apple's ecosystem, although you may not be able to connect the phone to like the latest version of an Apple Watch or even the latest AirPods Pro, which it'll have some issues when you try to connect it. But for the simple person that doesn't really care, or someone that's just looking to get a phone like the iPhone 6 here, you can pretty much get this phone under probably $50 if you look on eBay or Amazon, because Apple no longer produces the phone. You probably get it pre-owned or refurbished. And for someone that doesn't really care about all the fancy stuff with cameras, those upgrades, just want to use the phone, be able to call and text, again, it will do that job for you in 2023. But overall, it's probably not worth it going into 2023 is kind of our take on it. So we want to hear from you guys. What's your thought on the iPhone 6? If you're using it, if you upgraded from it, leave a comment in the comment section while you're at it. Really appreciate hitting that like and subscribe button. See you guys next time.